Good morning. So we're here to talk about influence this morning. This is one of my favorite topics to talk about because no matter who we are, no matter where we are in our career, influence is critical to our ability to lead others. It's critical to our ability to be able to be successful in our roles. And so today we're going to talk about what we do with influence. Not just how do we become an influencer, but what do we do with influence once we have it? Because we're going to look at how influence can obviously be used for some pretty bad things too. So I intend this to be an interactive type session. The first thing I'd like you to do is if you have something to write with, get that out. You're going to need that. And I would like you to write down the person that you believe was most influential in your life. Could be a business person, could be a relative, could be, a teacher, a scout leader, band, sports coach, and a person that you think really influenced you, that has helped you become part of the person that you are today. Go ahead and jot that person down. So we're going to come back to that person a couple times throughout the course of the morning here. Now, what I want you to think about when it comes to influence, first off, is who do you influence? So someone want to help me out here. This is where it gets interactive. Who do you influence currently? Family, okay, specifically perhaps kids or siblings, something along those lines, okay. Who else do you influence? People who report to you. I hope so, right? Okay. Boards, okay, so that's almost influencing up a little bit, which is okay. Yep, we're going to talk about that concept. Members of your associations, absolutely. We tend to forget sometimes that, yes, the answers that I've heard are all typical answers. But sometimes we forget, or maybe we're bashful about saying, oh yeah, well, I'm in sales, I want to influence my customers, right? That's why we're in sales, to influence our customers, right? So I thank you for saying membership, right? You want the people with whom you do business to do business with you, right? And that's an influential thing. And so we're going to look at influence from a couple of different angles this morning. And I want you to expand your mind, too, on who you influence. Okay? Because all of those answers were correct. But I think you're going to find by the end of our time together this morning that you influence a lot more people than you think you do, both in terms of the types of people and the numbers of people that you influence. So I want you to use that same notepad where you have that person's name. I want you to draw this circle, put a dot in the middle for me. Now, what do you think that dot represents? I'm sorry? You, absolutely, you. You are at the center of the universe. Okay, now what it represents is your self-leadership. Now let's talk about this concept for a moment. Self-leadership is how we conduct ourselves, how we hold ourselves accountable to being the type of leader that our people need us to be. So think about the last time someone let you down. How did you feel? And this is in a business sense. How did you feel when that person let you down? They didn't come through on a project or didn't keep a promise. How did you feel? You felt bad. Annoyed, absolutely. What else? Betrayed. So these are strong words, right? And did that person give you excuses for why they let you down? Sometimes, right? Dog ate my homework, whatever. Does that make you feel any better when they give you excuses? No, you're like, you let me down. You said you would get something done or you would do it a certain way and you didn't do it. Now, what does this have to do with self-leadership? Think about the last time you let somebody down. You didn't follow through on something you said you would do. It was late, whatever the case might be. What did you tell yourself about why you let that person down? Just think about that. Don't call it out. Just think about that. Did you tell yourself it was really okay because the timeline wasn't realistic anyway? That you were delayed because you were trying to make it perfect. So it's actually better now that you turned it in late because it's better than it would have been before. What kind of excuses do you give yourself to let yourself off the hook for that? Do you see the interesting thing there? We don't let others off the hook when they don't follow through for us, but we sometimes allow ourselves off the hook when we don't follow through for others. That's a challenge to us becoming influential people. We all make mistakes. We're all going to let people down. It happens, right? But it's how we hold ourselves accountable. That's what self-leadership is all about. Do we hold ourselves accountable in the same way we hold others accountable? Maybe even to a higher standard, perhaps. That's critical. All leadership, all influence starts with us. It starts inside. So nothing that I can teach you today is going to help you until you master your own self-leadership. To working on the things you know you need to work on to be the leader your people need you to be. So let's draw another line here. I want you to draw the line from your self-leadership going south. Anyone want to take a stab at what that line might represent? We don't know, Ed. We're here. Tell us, right? Tell us what it represents. It represents positional leadership. Now, what positional leadership means is that someone will follow you simply because of your title or your position relative to their position. So, in my question about who you influence, several of you mentioned that you influence your employees, right? So this is kind of what we're talking about. Now, here's the challenge with positional thinking. Think about the last time that you got a new boss. What were you thinking when that new boss came in to the workplace? What was going through your mind? Hope he's not a fill in the blank, okay? Right? Absolutely, right? We want someone who's good. What else? I kind of covered it. Okay. Knowledgeable, they know what they're doing, right? That they deserve to be in the role they're in. Uncertainty, so you're uncertain about what? Okay. Okay, so the decision making, are they going to be a micromanager? Absolutely. What else? They're not going to clean the slate, okay, and be like, oh, well, here we go. They got to put their stamp on things. Why are we worried about whether they're going to be a micromanager or clear the slate and start everything over again? Why does that really bother us? Okay, so lost equity at work, I like that term. For whom? Everybody that worked there before, okay? Yeah. So what it really comes down to is us. If this person is a jerk, it impacts us. If they're a micromanager, it impacts us. If they change everything, they're erasing work that we did, right? It's all about us. Told you, you're at the center of the universe, at least for this slide, right? You're at the center of the universe. So when we think about this idea of positional leadership, what we're doing with this individual is we're giving them a small amount of time to show us what they're all about. Now, that small amount of time could be weeks, it could be months, could be a year, but it's a small amount of time where you're going to check them out. Are they going to change everything? Are they going to be a jerk? Are they going to micromanage me? All those things you mentioned, right? We're giving them time. Now, what happens if during the course of that short period of time, they become some of those things? What happens to your attitude? Probably goes downhill, just like this arrow, right? You're like, great, now I got to manage this goofball again, right? I just trained another boss, now I got to train this boss. So positional leadership, the whole point of this is it's fleeting. And so what happens to us sometimes is we think, oh, I got a promotion, or I got this new job, I got another stripe on my shoulder, and people are going to respect me because of that. Short period of time. That's it. And we're going to see why that is later on in the session this morning. But ultimately, it comes back to us, right? We want to know what's in it for us. And so that positional leader, some of you are in positional leadership right now because maybe you're in a new role. Or maybe you have a new employee. It works that way too. A new employee comes in, they're giving you a certain amount of respect for a certain period of time to see what you can do. Okay? And so what we have to recognize is that during that short period of time, we have to make an impact on these people. We have to be influential with them. Now, let's draw a line going across. You can go either direction. You can go west to east, east to west, whatever floats your boat. What kind of leadership do you think this represents? Ah, very good. It is peer leadership. Excellent. So I would be willing to bet that some of you are in this level of leadership right now, where perhaps other people in your organization who are of similar level to you come to you for advice. Look to see where you're going, what you're doing, what you're saying. What values related to the organization's mission are you exhibiting? This is where true leadership begins. And we don't get to peer level leadership without influence. And that's why this is so critical, right? We can lead ourselves well, but if we're not influential, then we're just a one-man band. We can have positional leadership, but it's fleeting. It's not until we start to develop our influence and we use the things we're going to talk about today that we can even get to this idea of peer level leadership. And so this is where influence kicks in, and other people either outwardly acknowledge or inwardly accept the fact that we are leaders in the organization. And this idea of peer level leadership, it can go up too. So I'm not just talking about those that are same level as we are, but it could be that higher ups in the organization recognize that we are a leader and an influencer among the people as well. This is where we want to strive to get to at a minimum with our influence and our leadership. And as the morning goes on, we'll see why this is so critical to at least get our leadership beyond ourselves, beyond our positional thinking, and into that peer level leadership. Last arrow is going up. We're going north. Anyone want to take a stab at what this represents? Managing up, kind of, sort of leading up. It's all about leaders. We're not managing in here. We're going to be leaders. Now, here's what leading up means. Well, let me tell you what it does not mean. Let's start there. It does not mean we are leading people above us. What it means is that we are developing other leaders now. So we're taking those peers that we've influenced and motivated at the last step, and we're able to make them influencers in their own right. That's the magic sauce to our success. So that means we're taking our peers, maybe people above us, perhaps even people that report to us, and we're turning them into other leaders, other influencers in the organization. That's huge. That's what we all need to strive for as leaders. We're not all going to get there, and that's okay. It's the peak of the mountain of leadership when we are developing other leaders. So what I want you to think about is looking at this little diagram we've drawn. Where are you in your leadership journey right now? And think about that in terms of where we're going to head through the rest of the session today. What's it going to take for me to get to that next level? Obviously, influence is going to be a huge, huge part of that. And that's why we're going to talk about influence so much today. But where are you? Maybe you have a new role, and so you're in that positional leadership right now. Maybe you're well established, and you know that people come to you looking for your input, your ideas. After my session yesterday, one of the attendees came up and we were talking about some challenges she's having in her workplace. And it became very clear to me that she is in a peer leader level of her leadership right now because of the stories she was telling me about the types of people that are coming to her for advice on their careers and how to handle things within the organization. So if you are seeing that people are coming to you regularly, not just to vent, but to say, hey, I've got a challenge. Can I bounce something off of you? I have an idea. Will it fly? If you're having those types of conversations with people, you're likely at the peer leadership level, and you're ready to take that final step up to leading up and turning other people into influencers. And we're going to explore that today. How do we make that happen? How do we become influencers ourselves? But more importantly, how do we then turn that into making other people influencers as well? Now, I love this quote by John Maxwell. Anyone read any of John Maxwell's stuff? He's got plenty of books out there, right? He's been around a long time. If you've not, I don't know, the guy's got over 30-some books. Pick one, read it. They're all awesome. Absolutely. I haven't read all of them, but everything I've read is awesome. Love this quote by him, right? That without influence, we can't possibly be leaders. It's impossible. Think about anyone that you would think of as a leader. Are they influential? They almost have to be, right? Tell me, the person that you wrote down at the beginning of the session, how many of you wrote down someone from your personal life? Show of hands. Okay, maybe about half the room. Was it a parent? Many people do a parent, maybe a grandparent, something like that, okay? Those of you that didn't write down someone from your personal life, how many of you was it a work relationship? Okay, very few. How many of you was it a former scout leader, band leader, coach, teacher, or someone that falls into that category? Okay, a couple there. So if we put together all of you that raised hands that were non-business related, that should show you even more of an example of why influence has nothing to do with your position, but it has to do with you, okay? And so when you think about leadership and you think about influence, can you use influential leadership for bad things? Anyone want to give me an example? I see a lot of head shaking. Give me an example. Enron, right? Okay, so huge financial mess, messing with the books, the whole bit, bankrupted a lot of people, blew up a whole company. Absolutely. Okay? What else? Or who else? Tell you what, give me a name of a good leader. Someone in the public sector who's a good leader, even a great leader. Wow, are they that hard to find? Today's environment, perhaps so. Corpus Christi city manager. Don't know that person, but I will take your opinion on that one. Richard Branson. Okay? A lot of people disagree with how he spends his money. So what? It's his money, right? A lot of people would probably disagree with how you spend your money too. Okay? But the reality is he's done some pretty cool things. He's a self-made person, right? I love his quote actually where he says, train your people so well that they can leave, but treat your people so well that they stay. That's great wisdom. It's great wisdom. I'd like to talk about Hitler for a moment. Was Hitler a great leader? Absolutely he was. When you think in terms of what it takes to be a great leader, you got to have followers, right? Otherwise you're just out for a walk. Did he have followers? Lots of them, right? Did they believe in his vision and his mission? Did they work hard to execute on that vision and mission? Is that the definition of a leader? Yeah. We want people following us who are dedicated to our vision and mission and who are willing to help us execute on that vision and mission. Obviously, he used his influence and his leadership for evil. And so the reason that I bring that up is sometimes when we think about what it means to be influential or what it means to be a leader, we look at it through these rose-colored glasses. And we forget that with influence and with leadership comes some pretty awesome responsibility to use it for good and the betterment of our people. And we could go down through history to see how influence was used in horrible ways. There's a mini-series on Netflix right now called The Making of a Tyrant. It's like a, 5-part mini-series. It's fascinating. That if you think back through history at all the most evil tyrants and dictators, they all had a very similar process for how they rose to power. And some of that obviously was through terror, but most of it was through being influential within their clans or their communities to start before they started to move up the ranks, right? They didn't really show their evil side till they got up there, but they followed that method of, I got to be a leader myself. I've got to develop other leaders. Now I can really march forward with my bigger plans. It's scary. So what I want you when you leave here, one, I want you to be dedicated and committed to becoming more influential. But more importantly, I want you to ask yourself why you want to influence. Is it just to gain position? You want to climb the corporate ladder. If you get more influence, I'm going to climb the corporate ladder, and that's important to me. Well, that's a selfish reason, and okay, whatever. I'm not here to judge your reasons. But what we have to remember is that positional leadership is fleeting. It doesn't last. And all those tyrants, they don't last very long. Some longer than we'd prefer, but they don't last because that position sooner or later erodes. Okay? People will overthrow you. You have revolt within the company ranks. And so that's why it's so critical to remember that that stripe on our shoulder is responsibility. It's not about, oh, look at me, I've got the corner office. Look at me, I've got the bay view windows, okay? It really comes with a lot of responsibility. And part of that responsibility is our dedication to improving other people and developing them as leaders and getting out of this idea that I'm a leader because I've got a title. Again, even titles are fleeting. So, take a look at this picture. You got these guys, they're climbing this craggy mountain, okay? If you think about if you've ever read people that have climbed Mount Everest, do they do it alone? It takes literally a whole village to do it, right? You've got your guides, you've got all the equipment carriers, you've got medics. I mean, you've got all this stuff in order to do that. You can't get to the highest peak in the world without a team. And yet sometimes we think that we can get to the highest peak in our profession without the help of others. It's impossible. Take a look at the person next to you. Let's say you were standing up and you didn't want to allow them to stand up. What would you do? Okay, so you're going to stand up first. Go ahead and stand up. We're going to make this interactive. Okay, now if you wanted to keep her from standing up, what would you do to her? Could you stand up with her doing that right now? But look what's happening. She's leaning down on her, right? Putting her weight on top of that person's shoulders. How often do we do that as leaders? We almost make our people carry us instead of the other way around. But here's what happens. So when she's standing there and she's putting her arms down and she's putting her weight down on that person, she physically got smaller, right? She wasn't standing up in nice prim posture. She was down here. We make ourselves smaller when we hold our people back. But if you look at these guys climbing the mountain, look at them. They're reaching down to folks lower. They're standing up and they're pulling up. They're actually making themselves physically taller in order to help other people up that peak. That's what leadership is about for us. when we're talking about developing our people. I remember early on in my career, I was probably, 25, 26, was in my first management position. And I had a boss, worst boss I ever had. Not because he was a bad guy or a jerk, but because he didn't get it. Like, he's the kind of guy you could go sit and have a beer with and have a good time with. But he was not a leader. And I didn't necessarily realize it at the time, but hindsight's always a beautiful thing. But one thing he said to me stood out, and even as a mid-20-something in a first job, I knew it was not right. He said, Eddie, you have to understand something. He said, you can't, you're going to gather a lot of knowledge in your career, and you can't give that knowledge away because that knowledge is power. And if you give that knowledge away, you're going to become invaluable. And I went, huh? That doesn't make any sense. So I can't share my knowledge with anybody? Doesn't make any sense to me. I didn't say that at the time because I was just a punk kid and I wanted to be sure that I was right. Okay? Now, 30 years later, I'm like, what a stupid thing to say to somebody. Because the reality is, if you hold your knowledge, do you get valuable to the company? Yes, you do. In the position you're in, and that's it. So if you want to climb the ladder, you want to climb the mountain, go ahead, hold on to that knowledge. I guarantee you're not going anywhere. Because you will become so valuable, no one could ever come in and replace you. And I meet people like this all the time. They're whizzes at their job, and they want to know why they're not going anywhere. I say, well, have you trained your replacement? Well, no. Why would I do that? Then I'm going to get eliminated because they'll put someone else in there. Okay? Well, then that tells me that you're not ready to be a leader and move up. Because until you can develop other leaders, you're not going to climb the ladder. You're not going to climb the mountain. We need our people to help us climb the mountain. And if we don't develop them, they're not going to be able to produce for us. And that's what leaders do. They get people through their influence to produce for them. And not in a mean, useful, I'm using you kind of way, but in a, here's my vision, are you going to help me get there? Are you as fired up about attaining this vision as I am? Yeah, boss, I am. Let's go get it. That's what our people want. They want help getting up the mountain. And if you want to lead up, that's the key to it. You've got to be willing to share your knowledge. I was doing some reading on Andrew Carnegie. You all know who Andrew Carnegie is, right? Okay, self-made businessman, steel, the whole bit. He was being interviewed at one point later in his career. And they were obviously talking about his success. And the journalist said, Mr. Carnegie, do you realize that you have 42 millionaires working for you? And he said, no, I didn't really realize that. Now, to put that in perspective, that $1 million back then is worth about $20 million today, okay? And this journalist goes on to say, well, Mr. Carnegie, where did you find 42 millionaires to come work for you? And he smiled and he said, well, they weren't millionaires when they came to work for me. We worked together to build a company, and the fruits of their labor were rewarded financially because of that. And he went on to say, what I did was I hired people that had the same vision as I had and were willing to follow me along the path of creating this organization. He said, I went gold mining. Now, most of us have probably never been in a gold mine, okay? But have you been in a cave before? Okay, are caves pretty? I mean, sometimes you see the pretty stalactites and stuff, but, they're cold, they're damp, they're kind of dirty. Do you think a mine's any different? No, it's dirty, it's cruddy, it's dark. So to mine for gold, what do you have to do? Dig, right? You got to dig through dirt to find the gold. So now you find some gold nuggets. What do you do next? I'm sorry? Polish it. And that's what Mr. Carnegie was saying. He said, I had to go mine for gold with these guys. And when I found them, I had to polish them to turn them into the leaders that I needed them to be to help me to grow my company. He was the epitome of helping other people up the mountain. That's what we're called to as leaders. That's what our people are asking of us. In fact, they're demanding it today. You all know that people don't quit companies. They quit who? Managers and supervisors, right? They quit their bosses. I've done it a few times in my career. I've left decent companies because I couldn't take the boss anymore. And you probably see head shaking. You've all been there, right? So think about that in terms of why you left that person. They probably weren't doing anything for you. They probably were not helping you to get ahead. In fact, they may have even been actively keeping you from getting ahead because they were too unself-assured to share their knowledge and develop you. Now, here are some methods of influence, or the methods of influence. Take a look at this list. We are not going to talk about all of them, but I would like you to select the one that you think is most common in the American workplace today. I'll give you a hint. It is not respect. It's also not force, by the way. So to narrow that down a little bit. Any ideas? Someone says exchange. Anyone else? Intimidation. I hear intimidation. Any other votes for intimidation? Positional. Intimidation. Now, here's the thing. When we think about being intimidated, sometimes we think that we're this little chihuahua and it's the Great Dane looking down at us, okay? Now, anyone in here own a Great Dane, by the way? No? Okay. They can be really nice dogs. They can be mean, but they can be really nice dogs. Are they intimidating? Yeah, they're huge, right? You could ride these things. They're huge. Everyone loves a little chihuahua. You hold them and you pet them, and they're cute and cuddly. What we forget is that intimidation is not just about the person who pounds their fist on the desk saying, my way or the highway, okay? They're probably a lot more subtle than that. After my first stint in operations, the company moved me into human resources. And the organization I was with was a union shop, and so the union bargaining agreement dictated how people of an hourly perspective moved up through the organization, okay? And so we had a setup where we had a lot of inside employees moving packages and boxes and loading trucks, that kind of thing, right? And then, of course, you had the delivery drivers. And so what would happen is people would sign up to become drivers, and then that happened based on seniority if you met other criteria. Now, this one gentleman had signed the list to become a driver, and so I'm working on his packet, his background, and I was seeing some things that I wasn't quite sure fit with the expectations we had of drivers in terms of his driving history and that sort of thing. And so I went to the divisional manager. I said, I don't think we can let him go out. Here's why. Now, this division manager and I were walking through the operation. Now, as a divisional manager, he was 2 levels above me. I did not directly report to him. It was a dotted line relationship, but he was 2 levels above me. This gentleman's we're walking through the operation. He puts his arm around me. It says, Eddie, you got to understand something. Those people are different than you and me. And sometimes we got to think like they think. And I kind of gave him one of those looks like, well, what does that mean? Is that intimidation? What do you think? We might not label it as such. But here's a man old enough to be my father, 2 levels above me in the organization, trying to, quote, be fatherly in his way, but in his subtle way was basically saying, no, you're going to do this. Intimidation is not always the big dog growling at the little dog. Sometimes it's the passive-aggressive stuff. Sometimes it's the, we can't change that because fill in the blank. We've always done it that way. That's intimidation. So, intimidation is a dangerous thing. And if you walk out of here with nothing else, remember that it comes in many, many different forms. If you run a meeting, and at the end of the meeting, you look at your people, you were in charge of the meeting, you look at your people and you say, I thought that was a good meeting. What did you think? Have you influenced them? Yeah, they're going to say, yeah, boss, yep, that was a great meeting. That's intimidation. Because what are they supposed to say? No, you're a horrible team meeting leader, boss. It's horrible. We got nothing done. I know you're walking out thinking those things, but you wouldn't say it because the boss thinks they just had a great meeting. And because of their position, you allow that influence to happen. So, be very sensitive to how you might be intimidating other people. And most of us, when it happens, we're not intentionally doing it. We're not thinking about, well, I'm going to intimidate this person into acting the way that I want them to act or into being who I want them to be. It's subtle, and we don't know we're doing it. Sometimes it's having the meeting, and you're in your office at your desk, and they're across the desk from you. That's intimidating. I don't care how nice you are. That can be an intimidating environment. I love to go to a neutral spot. I love to go to my associate's office to have discussions. It's on their turf. There's no worries over that, oh, we're going to the boss's office. I'm across the desk from them. I mean, those are things that I know they're subtle, and you're thinking, really, Ed? But think about where you are and when you have to go to that person's office to have, even if you have a great relationship with that person, it is a little bit different. So, here's the challenge with intimidation. If we are intimidators, it leads to disengaged people. They tune out because they feel like they've got no say in what's going on. And that's the real danger of being an intimidator, even one who's not intentionally intimidating. We know right now that about 50% of our workforce is actively disengaged for a number of reasons, not the least of which is the pandemic and the worries over all of that business. Okay? The scarier thing is, what does disengagement lead to? Low productivity. Usually I hear, oh, those people are going to leave. Low productivity is the real sin of disengagement because they stay and they don't do work for us. I'd almost rather them leave at that point so that we could get someone in and fire them up. But whose problem is it when we have a disengaged workforce? Who caused it? We did. We caused it. I was giving a talk to a group of business owners not long before the pandemic, and was talking about this idea of engagement. I used a bit of a different picture, but it was essentially the same thing, where guy's in a boardroom, his head's on the table, he's totally out of it, right? And this one gentleman was right up front, and he goes, I'd fire that guy. I don't want that in my workplace. And I said, well, I agree, I don't want it in my workplace either, but whose fault is that? He says, well, it's his fault. I hire self-starters, and I want people that are go-getters. I said, okay, I get it. We all want that, right? But you see where I'm trying to lead this guy. And I said, well, when you hired him, was he a go-getter? Yeah, he was a go-getter when I hired him. I said, so whose fault is he's not a go-getter anymore? And he just kind of looked at me. I said, so you're telling me there's only one of two things that could have happened. Either he smoked you in the interview and he really wasn't a go-getter, or he was a go-getter and someone squished his flame. And the person who can only squish his flame is you because you're the leader. After I thought he was going to tackle me, I think he realized that there was some level of aha moment there. But we have to remember that. If you have people in your workplace that are disengaged, ask yourself why. Were they ever good? And if so, what happened there? And I'm not worried about whose fault it is. I'm worried about how do we fix it? How do we rescue that person? Because we all know right now it's hard to find good people. So we've got to be leaders and hold on to the people that we have by keeping them fired up. When we think about leading, what we have to ask ourselves is why? Why do you want to be an influencer? Why do you want to be a leader? Hopefully it's not for selfish reasons. I want to climb the corporate ladder. I get what Crow's saying. I want to use this to climb the corporate ladder. Okay, well, good for you. You're going to leave a trail of, trampled on employees behind you. Or do you want to be the leader who, you're at the head of the school of fish, but they're willingly following you because of what you've done for them along the way, and you've pulled them along with you? I think there's no higher calling for us as leaders than to influence others along their career paths. And despite the fact that I had a pretty horrible boss in my first professional job, I've been very fortunate to work for some pretty cool people over the course of my career. And I can tell you honestly that all of them, both good and bad, left some trace on me that has affected me for who I am right now as a person and as a leader. And it's helped me to realize, even through the mistakes that those folks made, I've been able to learn from some of those things. So part of what I want you to do when you leave here today and you're thinking about this why do I really want to be a leader? Think back about the things that you've learned from the people that you've worked with along the way, both good and bad, and why you've learned those lessons, and how can you keep from making the mistakes, and how can you replicate the good stuff. But your why is where the power is. And again, I'm not, this is not altruism here. I mean, if you want to climb the corporate ladder, by all means, go for it. Just remember that you've got to take people with you. Because if you get to the top of that mountain and you've used other people to trample on to work your way up to the top of the mountain, there's nobody going to be following you at the top of the mountain. You're going to be standing up there all by yourself, and you will fail. Now, when we think about that, and we think about this developing of others, that's where influence really comes in. How we develop people to their fullest potential so that they bring their full selves to work every day and are fully committed to our mission and vision, to me, that's our why. If we can do that with our team, forget about what's going on above you. You might be sitting here saying, well, gosh, Ed, all this sounds great, but my boss is an ogre. So what? Somewhere, the ogreness has to stop. So let it stop with you. You are in full control of how you work with the people below you, right? So it doesn't matter what your boss is doing to you. Work with those people below you. I guarantee you it'll pay dividends. It will absolutely pay dividends. So the next thing with influence is trust. I guarantee you will not be committed to someone unless you trust them. Think about how valuable trust is, not just in a business sense, but in a personal sense. We've all been burned, right? Someone we trusted let us down. And depending on the nature of the relationship with that individual, it hurts. Hurts really bad. Have we ever broken trust with somebody? Probably. We're human, right? What we have to ask ourselves is, what have I done to regain that trust, to redeem myself? It takes a long time. It takes a lot longer to build that trust back up than it ever did to destroy it. But if our people don't trust us at the most basic level, forget everything we've talked about today. They're not going to allow you to influence them if you don't at first have their trust. And trust is going to mean a lot of things we're going to explore here for a moment. But at its bare minimum, it's, do you have their back? Or are you going to throw them under the bus at the first moment you get? That's huge. It's absolutely huge from a trust perspective. And so when we think about it, we don't want to coerce, we don't want to manipulate. I want you to really think about it in terms of, I want to give back to my people. And that may mean that you've got a couple people reporting to you or that you interact with you don't really care for. They're in the boat too, and they have their role. We can't get along with everyone all the time, right? But we got to work with them. And if they're a productive employee, then we need them on the team. And it'd be nice if we liked them, but at a minimum, we've got to get them to trust us, and we have to trust them. Now, we could talk for a whole nother hour on trust, but we know how important it is, okay? So I love this quote from Stephen Covey from The Speed of Trust, and I want to read it because it's so powerful. He talks about the fact that the speed at which trust is established with clients, with employees, is the essential ingredient for a high-performing and successful organization. Wow. Wow, right? So whether or not we develop trust with our people is going to determine whether we hit our objectives. It's that critical. I recall working with a client a few years back that was struggling with trust. It was a small association, and the association president brought me in. It was a team of about 10, 12 people, and he said, "Ed, our culture here is horrible, and I need some help." And the more we dug around, it was really 2 people in there that were undermining everything else that was going on. A couple years later, are those 2 people with the organization? Nope, we managed them out. They were destroying everything. They were breeding mistrust. Trust is key to how we perform. So if there's trust issues in your workplace, before you do anything else we've talked about today, address the trust issues. You can't get anywhere if you've got dissension in the ranks. And that may mean that you've got to swallow some pride because maybe you're at the center of some of the trust issues. Maybe some things you've done in the past have caused people to look at you sideways when you walk down the hallway. We got to own that. We all have skeletons in our closet, so we've got to own them. And we've got to work hard to build that trust back up if we care about our organization and we care about our own success. We've got to mend those fences, and that's a journey. It's a long-haul game. You can't go back and say, gosh, I got so invigorated by this guy. I'm so sorry that I burned you last year. Let's kiss and make up and call it even. It's not that easy, right? Please don't go back and kiss your coworkers. That's a whole nother problem, okay? But it's a challenge for us, okay? And we've got to commit to owning a problem if we created it and being committed to fixing it. And then let our people see that we are, in fact, committed to fixing it, okay? So here are the things that people want to know about us as leaders. The very first thing, if you want to build trust, the very first thing is, do you care about me? We're back to me, right? That's where it all started. Me. Do you care about me? Do you care about your people? Notice I don't say in there, do you like your people? Be nice if you did, okay? Different story, different message. Do you care about them? If not, it's going to show. Next thing, can you help? There's that word me again. Can you help me? In other words, can you help me become the best person I can be? The most valuable person to this organization that I can be? If you can do those 2 things, and I don't want to minimize this, but if you can do those 2 things, that's where the trust will come from. So we've got to demonstrate that we care. We've got to demonstrate that we're willing and actively want to help those that we work with. That's that peer level of leadership coming in, developing other leaders. That's really what we're saying here. And you got to remember that by virtue of your position, People have to put some trust in you that you are going to help them develop themselves into their area of greater responsibilities, whatever that means to them. That's what we need to do as leaders. So you have to know what that means for your people, because it's going to be something different for everybody. Some people are just content in the role they're in. That's fine. Develop them to be the best person they are in that role, because we need those folks. If you got people that want to climb the ladder with you, great. Develop them enough that they can climb the ladder with you. You do those things, that's where trust comes from. Okay? So there's a lot of different ways to increase your influence. I'm only going to talk about one or two here. All right? I believe this is the key way to increase your influence. And that's adding value to yourself. Why? Gosh, Ed, wait a minute. It's all about me? Yes, it keeps coming back to you, right? And your self-leadership. Adding value to yourself means developing yourself to be the best leader you can be. And you do that by coming to sessions, listening to podcasts. Don't let it just be about the technical side of your job when you're looking at your self-development. Yes, we need that piece, but we also have to develop our leadership skills. Leadership's a journey. I'm not sure you can ever look in the mirror and say, I'm a leader. We're all on the journey. So it starts with you as part of that self-leadership. What do you need to do? How do you need to develop yourself to be what your people need you to be? That's what you have to ask yourself. What do I need to do to be what my people need me to be? A lot of folks say, well, Ed, I'm not a leader, and I'll worry about all this garbage when I get to be a leader. It's too late. It's illogical. Think about that for a minute. If you wanted to play a professional sport, it's football season, let's talk football. You want to be an NFL quarterback. Would you decide to wait to learn to throw a football until you were drafted? Laughing, right? It's ridiculous. It's a ridiculous thought. Of course not, Ed. I'd be playing pee-wee football. I might see a quarterback's coach if I show some promise. I got 10, 12 years I got to develop before I ever even think about getting drafted. So why, when it comes to our leadership skills, we say, well, when I get the position, I'll worry about becoming a leader? Too late. Remember that positional leadership fleeting. So if you want to be a leader, you've got to work on it now, regardless of where you're at in your career. Now. Not when you get to whatever that magic position is that you think you want. Oh, if I get to be the head of our association, well, then I'll take some leadership classes. I'll read some of those books you were talking about, Ed. Too late at that point. You've got to demonstrate that you're a leader to get the leadership position. That's kind of how it works. I ask myself these three things every single day after every single major thing that I do. What went right? What went wrong? What do I do better? I'll ask myself that after this session. And what it's helped me to do is realize how I need to continue to up the ante for me. How do I continue to get better? But the key is, when we ask these questions, we've got to be honest with the answers. You've got to be honest with yourself. It's okay to mess up. It's okay to say, yeah, I blew that one. Okay, what am I going to do different about it? But it's okay to also look at the things that you did really well that day and say, what can I do differently? Yeah, I know I knocked it out of the park with that decision. But what else can I do? What could have made it even better? I do this every single day. I'll do it after this session. I do it after every meeting, after every phone call. It's just become a habit for me. And it's helped me to really stay focused on who I need to be for my team and my clients and my audiences. Because we're all on the journey. We're never going to be at a situation where we can say, oh, nothing went wrong today. We're human. We're going to blow a whole lot of things, right? It's okay. Own it. Fix it. Let your people know you're owning it and that you're going to fix it. And you're not going to have to worry about the trust piece. So I want to finish by saying we're coming back full circle. If you lead yourself well, others will follow you. Okay? But it starts with you. It started with you. It ends with you. How you handle you is the biggest determiner of whether or not you will be a good leader. And I think nothing says it better than Jackie Robinson. Jackie said, "A life isn't significant except for the impact it has on other lives." That's huge. There's a lot of wisdom in that statement. So what I'm going to ask you all to do today is go out and think about how you can be significant in the lives of the people that you lead at work, in your personal lives, and with your family. How can you be significant to those people? Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for your energy and your willingness to chat back with me. I hope you enjoy the rest of the day in the conference.